Welcome, everybody. So I'm here with my longtime friend, Tom Michilak. And Tom Michilak is a Center for Political Innovation member, but he's also an auto worker. He works at Chrysler in Detroit. He's a member of the United Auto Workers Union. And while the U.S. media hasn't done a very good job of explaining it to people or letting people know about it, it appears that a strike in the big three auto manufacturing corporations is looming over the country. Tom, do you want to explain what's going on here?
Sure. Well, we have a new union president, Shawn Fain, who takes a bit more of a militant approach. Previously, when GM went on strike, which I did an interview with you back then, it was only GM. There was a reluctance to have any more than just one of the big three on strike at a given time. Now, with the more militant leadership, the intention is to have all three be on strike to really flex the muscles of the union and put the squeeze on the big three altogether. Really what this comes down to is an attempt to roll back all of the concessions that have been handed over to the employers over the last several decades. The orientation is something like this is a generational, once in a generational fight of the union to reestablish a more militant posture. But overall, that's how I characterize it as far as, a narrative of what's going on.
Right. Now, there was a vote to strike, from what you told me, that if their demands were not met, if the company didn't come to the table with a deal that met the demands, they would strike within a certain number of days. And from what you told me and from what I'm seeing, that vote was overwhelming. Can you talk about the mood among auto workers and why they feel now is the time to go on strike if they don't get their demands?
Yeah, the authorization to strike was a 97% voting in favor, which isn't in and of itself like it's just the authorization to strike. Were the union and the employers unable to come to some kind of agreement? But I mean, like from where I work, the mood is, even from people who aren't militant, like unionists or anything like that, the demands overall are perceived as just. They tend to have to do with the use of temporary workers, for one. That's a really important one. Even just like where I work, I've worked with people who have been working doing the same work that I do for 15, 16 years, but they spent half of that time as a so-called temporary worker. But a temporary worker works full-time doing the same exact work, and their seniority date is like 7 years. As you know, they've been working there for 15 or more. That's widely perceived as something unjust. I don't think even the most conservative auto worker thinks that that's remotely acceptable. The cost of living adjustment is another big sticking point. Especially now with inflation and such, never mind the slow pace of wage increases over the last several decades. The mood is that it's time for something big to change.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of misinformation in mainstream media. One of the claims I saw floating around was that the auto workers are demanding a 46% increase in pay. That doesn't sound right to me. Can you debunk that for me?
Well, I don't know how that's exactly calculated, but I know that one of the demands of the UAW is a 32-hour work week for 40 hours pay. Perhaps that's something that's calculated into that. The different companies are proposing different increases in pay. Like Ford, for example, is proposing a 12% increase in pay over, I don't know, maybe the life of the contract. I don't know if they mean an immediate 12%, but something that's considered to be meager. Maybe even like profit sharing might be how they calculate that. But I don't know if they mean overall.
Yeah, that seems.
But even so,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say that even with. Well, okay, I'll just say, even with like a cost of living adjustment, an automatic increase in wages, even an adjustment to how the profit sharing is calculated, I mean, it very well may amount to 42%. That's possible. And part of it is perceived as gaining lost ground. So, I mean, wages have been stagnant. Pensions, for those who have them, have been stagnant. By the way, being not tier one. Anyone hired after 2007, I believe, is considered tier two, if not a temp. So there's more than just one tier. But unless you were hired prior to 2007 and are full-time, you don't have a pension, for example. And even the existing pensions, they have not seen increase. I mean, at least just from what I've heard from fellow coworkers who are looking to retire soon, they tell me that their pension has not increased since, I think, the late 90s.
Wow. Well, one of the techniques that the bosses use in light of an auto workers strike, and I saw this when I was in Detroit during the American Axle strike, you saw it used during the GM strike, and they will most likely, you know, if this strike proceeds, which it looks pretty clear that it will proceed, you know, one of the techniques that the bosses like to use, especially in Michigan and in Detroit, is they try to say, well, the auto workers have it so much better than all these other workers. They're entitled, and so you know, tell other working class people like teachers and you know, Uber drivers and others not to support them on that basis. They have so much better accommodations. They have so much better you know, treatment and pay in their contracts that standing in solidarity with them, you're just helping them get a share that you should have. What's the response to that? That kind of you know, of smearing of the union, that effort to sow disunity among the working class?
Well, you know, it's funny you say that. There is sort of like a southeastern Michigan boomer folklore that goes that, you know, Ford, he set the standards in such a good way, but eventually the UAW got greedy and it all fell apart. There is this sort of sentiment that you'll hear just casually thrown around by some people. I've heard it all my life, not from everybody, but it's something that you hear. And yeah, I mean, I can see. So, I mean, I have not heard anybody personally outside of the UAW in the context of this strike say that to me. But I'm sure such people exist. But I mean, I would think that if you were to compare, whether it be Flint or the Detroit area or other places in the so-called Rust Belt, the existing standard of living that people like to boast that, you know, the middle class was born out of the UAW. It was born in after the Flint sit-down strike. We've seen what the consequences of that being largely ripped away are, and the rippling effects that it's had beyond just the auto industry itself. I mean, one of the things in articles that I've read in the context of this strike is that a strike poses a danger to all the other industries that exist to cater to the existence of the auto industry. Even just like around the plant that I live, around the plant that I work at, all the businesses that surround it seem to exist to cater to the fact that there are workers with union pay who patron those businesses, whether they be restaurants or even just houses, or I mean, it's not just the auto workers living high on the hog. I mean, one of the arguments that the UAW is making now under Sean Fain is that it's that the UAW used to be the what sets the standard for the working class overall. So their appeal is one that it's not that we're some, you know, living in our ivory towers making living wages. That is something that affects everybody.
Yeah, and that you know, that it seems like the argument that you're articulating is that by making sure the auto workers have a decent pay and a decent contract, you're not just taking care of them and their families, you're taking care of the whole community. The stores, all the jobs, they set the standard. You know, they're spending their union pay in the neighborhood, and that really attacking auto workers means attacking these whole communities in Michigan. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I say that's right. Absolutely. And it's not for even people who don't work for the big three. Even maybe they had a family member who used to. Even within the context of kind of like this folklore that I'm talking about, it's not lost on people that if you were to look at Detroit now as compared to how it used to be, that entirely revolves around the existence of the big three and the prosperous working class therein. So that's not lost on anybody, I don't think.
Well, let me also ask, that then brings us to another point of discussion, which is generally the success of a strike depends on how much community support there is for the union outside of its own membership. Do you think the community in Michigan is going to come to support the auto workers? Do you see them respecting the picket line, supporting the auto workers, standing by them?
Yes and no. If nothing else, I would think that a lot of people would, at a minimum, have passive support. I don't know that it's like the old days where, scabs can be dealt with like the way they used to be. I don't foresee that happening. Even with the GM strike, I recall seeing a video of a truck attempting to enter a plant, and I did see guys trying to get a little like rough and tumble with them. But I don't think that the overall, I think that the culture is way different. Being able to wail on somebody, I don't think that, especially with cameras everywhere, that being the least of it, I don't think it's exactly the same. I could totally foresee a situation where people out of goodwill are coming to, deliver food or something to striking workers on the picket line. I could totally see that happen. I mean, I've seen that before. Even like during Occupy Detroit and subsequent Occupy movement, that thing happened all the time. So such a spirit exists. But I mean, how big of an outpouring it would be, I don't know. I don't even know to what extent that the UAW has made inroads beyond the union itself. I really can't say, but I can certainly tell you that there aren't going to be throngs of people trying to bust up the picket lines. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, now I'm curious. This vote was 97% to authorize a strike. What are the demographics? Are there a lot of Trump-supporting auto workers? Are there a lot of African-American and Latino auto workers? How diverse is the workforce in both ethnic and racial dynamics as well as in political composition?
That's an interesting question. I would say, certainly in Detroit, I haven't been to every plant, but it's a safe bet to say that they're more or less black and white, if not half and half each. And then, maybe like 40% black, 40% white, and then 20% other, so to speak. It's interesting. There's honestly a lot I could say about that and the way that this breaks down. Yes, the vote to strike, of course, crosses any racial boundaries. It's unanimous across the board. But it's interesting. Something I've observed in the UAW. This is sort of a bigger thing, but I sort of look at the UAW and my workplace in particular as in some ways a bit of a microcosm for how politics has taken form overall. For example, I'm going to try and steelman the various points of view each year. So in my union, the union officials, for the most part, the appointed members are for the most part black. The union top leadership is usually mixed between white and black. But the way that this works, unfortunately, is it's often, again, I'm just speaking for my own local, how it goes in my own plant. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but oftentimes the way that these things, like who gets elected to what, is when it's not an appointment. When it is an election, it is something of a popularity contest. It's not people who are saying, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you. Not really. It's when the rubber meets the road, it's like charismatic people who may throw favors to their friends, and it's one of these sorts of things. Okay, so there is that. And then you have sort of within this, and by the way, these people are, for the most part, very Democratic Party in their orientation. Okay, but then you have another subset of people who are white dudes, usually in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who are sort of like I don't know, like a Michigan good old boy kind of guy who wears camo and likes Trump, and he may even be, in some senses, more of a union militant, but he might perceive the arguably corrupt union leadership as being primarily black, and its composition being based on, again, a popularity contest and favoritism, and their Democratic Party kind of liberal allegiance as, like, it does kind of become racialized. Like, I can't tell you how many times one of these like good old boy white dudes have pulled me aside and have expressed a union militancy and wanting to like go into the Solidarity House downtown, drag them out and whip their asses, and then kind of quietly are explaining that there's this racial element as to why they can't do it. But then it gets turned around on them by not the union itself, but people who are more or less satisfied with the union orientation. They can point at the more militant white people and say, like, well, you don't want to be, they're just like racist, crazy white people. You don't want to get wrapped up in them. So there's this sort of dynamic where defending the status quo is perceived as kind of like a black progressive thing, and anger at the status quo is like a crusty old white guy thing. You know what I'm saying? And you can see this in politics broadly, and it definitely plays itself out that way in the union itself.
That's fascinating. And I guess my other question is, I mean, we always think of unions as being overwhelmingly Democrats, but I mean, are there a lot of auto workers who voted for Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all, I mean, where I work, I'll see pro-Trump graffiti on walls and stuff. Trump 2024, and then someone also cross it out, and I'll see things even like these, like, same kind of more probably pro-Trump people, I suspect, are people who write on the walls like the union is a mafia, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, there's definitely people who do support Trump. How it breaks down racially, though, if that's part of the question, I mean, it's mostly the white people, but not exclusively. And not all the white people do. I mean, you know, even like the crusty, like, racist white people or whatever, really not. I mean, it's fairly mixed in really well. I mean, pretty much for the most part, everybody gets along. I mean, there's all sorts of people. There's like, I've worked with black nationalists. I've worked with people who believe in floating pyramids and like all, you know what I mean? Like ancient bloodlines and all kinds of stuff. It's a very mixed bag of people. And everybody does get along pretty well for the most part. Even, you know, even the racism is, to the extent that it even exists, is more like mutual playful banter.
So what I'm curious about now, you know, you're telling me your experience as an auto worker, but you're also somebody who's been, you know, an activist for a long time. How is the left, or the so-called left, going to react to this strike? Because, you know, there's been this huge feeling that, you know, that we should focus on identity politics, gender issues, etc., and that talking about class is somehow fascist. How do you think the so-called left, the communist groups, the woke people, how are they going to react to this strike? Will they show the solidarity that they have generally shown in the past with organized labor? I know Detroit is a little bit of a different scene. There's more of a working class movement there than in other parts of the country. But I've heard, you know, that the Amazon union drive has been hurt by some of the woke politics, and that there's been kind of a struggle within the Amazon union drive around that issue. And I'm curious how the mainstream left, that in theory, at least on paper, supports labor unions, how are they gonna react to this strike? And will it be a moment where they have to kind of put up or shut up?
I would imagine that it might be something that's kind of used as a rhetorical, well, there's strikes against the bosses all throughout the country. There's a progressive upsurge going on around all these issues that you just named, and sort of lump within them, you know, and the UAW, kind of as like just a rhetorical device. That's probably what. I mean, because no one's going to condemn it. I mean, not no one, but no one in the. Okay, I don't think that broadly the left will say like it's not, identity politicsy enough, but they're not gonna put up, nor will they shut up. I don't think. I think they will just kind of opportunistically put it in their grab bag of things to bolster their worldview. Like surely what we're going to be going on strike for are the things that they're preoccupied with in their own imagination, of course. So we're if anything, we can be their rhetorical tool. That's what I think.
And then there's also increasingly now, and we saw this, there's kind of a rise of ultra-leftist elements. I know the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party, they tend to take a hostile position to labor unions, even when they're doing good things. They take the position, well, these unions aren't communist, and I saw that during the American Axle strike. They were basically acting like scabs, encouraging people to go back to work, break the UAW, it's a reformist union. Does that have an impact on how people view socialists, or is that a factor in Detroit? And do you think that'll be a factor during the strike?
To your first question, it actually does influence how people perceive socialists. It's interesting. The WSWS, SEP, Socialist Equality Party, they do have enough inroads within the auto industry that I've heard from people who aren't activists in any way, people who aren't connected to the socialist movement in any way, refer to the socialists. They're talking about the WSWS people. So that's just the socialists, and so they do have a presence. The people who are most embedded, the Marxists who are most embedded to any extent or have any contact with the UAW are 99% of it is Trotskyists, whether they be Spark, who every single day, if you drive past Warren Truck or Warren Stamping on Mound Road, you will see someone from Spark, couple of old people handing out orange pieces of paper to them. I don't know how receptive people are to it, but they're there. And the World Socialist website, they write about the UAW a lot. And so for UAW members who, if they were interested for whatever reason, and what do the socialists say about the UAW, that's where they'd go. But if they were to actually be urging people to go back to work, I don't think that I would be shocked if that's what they were doing. I don't think that they would. Certainly from my own contacts with people in Spark, just like casual conversations that I have with members who I know, they would be appalled at such a suggestion. I know that much. But I don't know how effective they would be.
I was referring more to the World website.
Okay.
They tend to take an anti-union position on things, like the union's problem.
So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they were to tell people to go back to work, though, in the context of a strike, that would be something that, frankly, I would find beyond the pale even for them. Because they want an alternative union. They want dual unionism. That's their bag. But I don't even think, if anything, they would. I don't know. Maybe if there was some, I'm just hypothesizing here based on how I understand the orientation to be. If there was some agreement reached that, gave us X but didn't give us Y and satisfied enough people, they probably would never accept it. I could imagine that. So I can't imagine them ever being in a position where they're in anything other than opposition to what the UAW does, which, fair enough, but I don't agree with their overall orientation.
Yeah, kind of a permanent opposition, ultra-leftists, that they're out of lockstep with where the union's at, with where the workers are at. They're just kind of on the outside screaming outdated rhetoric. And then I understand that, obviously I think that, like Wendy Thompson, I know, is an outspoken auto worker and a socialist in Detroit, right? Is she involved in things still, or, right? She was with Solidarity.
I honestly, somehow, I don't even think that I've ever met her.
Oh, okay. And, I know that like Solidarity, which is like a Trotskyist, they do labor notes. They kind of have a presence in the plants in Detroit to some degree or other, I've heard, right?
Perhaps, maybe they used to some degree. Even when I hear people speak about Solidarity, it's in the past through my contacts with Detroit activism, it's always been as sort of something that used to be, never something that I've seen firsthand, sort of like lore.
Okay. And then probably DSA, that union leadership that you mentioned, DSA probably has its fingers in there somewhere, right?
I would think so. I mean, Sean Fain just did a live stream with Bernie Sanders a week or so ago.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And I mean, Sean Fain, he does use kind of DSA sort of language. He does have like a vague kind of like class struggle kind of posturing against the billionaires, you know. I mean, he doesn't say it like, I mean, he more or less does it in the same way that Bernie Sanders would. And even as far as like switching over to electric vehicles, I've heard him use the phrase "a just transition." So it's you can see how that's sort of like. I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's not outside the realm of discourse that the Green New Deal fits into.
Right. So let me ask you, just to switch gears a little bit now. You know, we have a lot of people who watch this YouTube channel who will really want to support the auto workers if the strike happens. What can they do from wherever they are in the country or in the world? How can they support the picket line when this strike happens?
Well, from afar, I mean, you could. I'm sure that there's some way to donate directly to the UAW. There is a strike fund that we will be relying on in the event of a strike, which I think it would be $483 a week, and there's limits to that. So there very well may be a way to contribute to that. But if you happen to live somewhere where there is a picket line, I would try donating directly to them. I think that even just bringing people, even if someone wanted to do something as minimal as come with a box of donuts and coffee or something to people, I think that would be something that would boost people's morale. If you see a picket line, honk at it. That's a big deal. At least just to keep people. There's going to be people on the picket lines in shifts for 4 hours at a time around the clock for who knows how long. And I could imagine if you're on the picket line and all the cars going by are just kind of ignoring you. If you're being ignored by everybody, never mind just the cars, but just if you feel like you're being ignored, that would play a role in your overall morale. So if you can help out monetarily or just give us a honk, that'd be nice.
Okay, and what can the Center for Political Innovation do as an organization to support the strike when it breaks out?
That's a good question. If nothing else, raise awareness. If it's possible to provide any kind of clarity to the issues at hand, why have wages? What are the issues that face our union, and why is this the case? That might be helpful. Maybe something educational. Right now, something that I experience. I love talking to people in the plants because increasingly. Now, I've been there for almost 9 years. It's actually fairly ironic. When I was the heaviest into activism, there was the least ears willing to hear it. I'm less into it formally than I was, and now there appear to be more ears. And so I love talking to people, and there's so many people who are desperately trying to figure out not only what's going on in the plants, but just like the world at large. And there are definitely people who would be receptive to someone coming to speak directly to them about the issues that matter most to them.
Great. Well, Tom, I really do want to thank you. And as this strike breaks out, we hope it's short and quick and victorious for the union. But I'm sure that we will have you back on to give updates from the picket line. I'm sure you're going to send us video from the picket line of what's happening. And, it sounds like your union, you're ready to fight. You're ready to regain lost territory. You're ready to increase the wages and fight for the living standards that benefit the whole community in Michigan. So we offer you full support. We're on your side. We're proud to have you as a member of our organization. We want to thank you for your hard work and best wishes in the days to come.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you.